Right now, as you watch this, Donald Trump is sitting in Beijing. The man who called India a hellhole. The man who slapped India with the highest tariffs of any major economy. The man who said he stopped the India-Pakistan war. He is sitting with Xi Jinping, the man who built a dam on India's river, whose troops sat on Indian territory for years, whose country arms Pakistan. Two of the world's most powerful leaders are cutting deals in a room India was not invited into. And India is watching from the outside, hoping, praying, that what gets agreed in that room does not undo everything New Delhi has spent 20 years building. Welcome to BharatLens. Trump arrived in Beijing on May 13th. The summit runs 2 days. Tim Cook is there. Elon Musk is there. Jensen Huang of Nvidia, the man whose chips power the AI revolution, flew in at the last minute. This is not a diplomatic visit. This is a business summit disguised as a state visit. And it is happening at a moment of maximum danger for India. Because the single biggest pillar of India's foreign policy for the last 2 decades has been this, that the United States needs India as a counterweight to China. That the US-India relationship is built on a shared fear of Chinese dominance. That America will never get too close to Beijing because Beijing is the threat. That assumption is now being stress tested in real time. And the results so far are not reassuring. Let us be precise about what Trump and Xi are negotiating, because the details matter enormously for India. The two leaders are expected to finalize trade deals in technology, aircraft, and agriculture. Trump, who is at record low approval ratings domestically largely because of the Iran war and rising energy prices, needs a foreign policy win he can take home. A big deal with China, photographed, announced, celebrated, gives him that win. The American CEOs accompanying him have their own agenda. Apple needs its Chinese supply chain. Tesla needs Chinese battery components and the Chinese consumer market. Nvidia, despite export controls, wants access to China's enormous AI spending. On the Iranian war, Trump is expected to ask China to join an international operation to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. China has refused so far, partly because Iran is China's largest Middle Eastern oil partner, and partly because China is quietly benefiting from the chaos. If the strait remains closed, China's economic pain is real. But so is everyone else's. And China has leverage. It is Iran's most important diplomatic protector and economic lifeline. If Trump can persuade Xi to pressure Iran toward a ceasefire, he gets his war resolution. Xi gets concessions, on Taiwan language, on tariffs, on rare earth minerals, on semiconductor export controls. And Taiwan is the elephant in the room. Trump, who speaks off the cuff at the worst possible moments, has already raised eyebrows by being vague about whether he would defend Taiwan if attacked. China is hoping he says something in Beijing that shifts America's long-standing ambiguity on Taiwan towards something closer to Beijing's position. If that happens, the entire security architecture of the Indo-Pacific changes. Now here is the part that is keeping New Delhi awake. The idea of a G2, an informal duopoly where the United States and China jointly manage the world's most important decisions, has been floating around since 2005. Every time US-China relations improved, the G2 concept resurfaced. Every time they deteriorated, it died. This summit has revived it more seriously than at any point in the last decade. What does a G2 world mean for India? It means the end of India's most valuable strategic asset. India's entire foreign policy since 2005 has been built on being the swing power, the country that America needs because it is large, democratic, capable, and positioned between China and the Indian Ocean. If America and China reach a grand bargain, if they decide to manage Asia between themselves, India becomes a middle power that the two superpowers consult, not a strategic partner that either of them genuinely needs. The worst-case scenario for India from this summit has already been articulated clearly by analysts watching New Delhi closely. India has already been given the highest tariff of any major economy, 50%, while China, America's stated rival, is at 47%. India, a US partner, is paying more than China, a US adversary. If the Beijing summit results in tariff reductions for China, that gap widens further. Investors who were looking at India as an alternative to China for manufacturing will reconsider. Capital that was flowing toward India slows. The entire China plus one strategy that India has been positioning itself to benefit from gets complicated. India's energy security takes another hit too. If China secures exemptions from the Strait of Hormuz blockade, some kind of side agreement where Chinese tankers are allowed through, China gets cheaper oil while India remains exposed. China is the world's largest oil importer. It has the leverage to negotiate this. India does not. And the rare earth dimension. China controls over 80% of the world's processed rare earth minerals, the materials essential for electric vehicles, defense systems, semiconductors, and renewable energy. China used rare earth export restrictions to bring the US to the negotiating table. If the Beijing summit produces a deal on rare earths, Chinese supply in exchange for American technology or Taiwan concessions, India's own rare earth and critical mineral strategy gets complicated. Because India has been trying to build rare earth processing capacity partly to offer the world an alternative to China. If China and America resolve their rare earth tensions bilaterally, India loses that leverage. India is not sitting still. Modi is on the move, literally. This week, the Prime Minister begins a 5-nation European tour covering the UAE, the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, and Italy. The timing is deliberate. As Trump sits in Beijing, Modi is in European capitals reinforcing India's alternative partnerships. The message India is sending is clear. India does not need to choose between Washington and Beijing. India has options. Europe is deepening its trade relationship with India. The EU-India Free Trade Agreement, signed in January, is the largest trade agreement in Indian history. Sweden and Norway bring defense technology and Arctic strategic partnerships. Italy brings G7 engagement and Mediterranean connectivity. India is also watching the summit very carefully for signals on Taiwan. If Trump concedes anything on Taiwan, any language that tilts toward Beijing's one China position in a way that undermines Taiwan's de facto autonomy, it matters for India. Not because India has a formal alliance with Taiwan, but because the same logic that protects Taiwan's sovereignty protects every smaller power in Asia from Chinese coercion. A weakened Taiwan commitment is a signal to every Asian nation that American security guarantees are negotiable. India's strategic community is also keenly aware of what comes next. After Trump leaves Beijing, Vladimir Putin arrives. Xi meeting Trump and then Putin in the same week is the most significant diplomatic calendar India has seen in years. If those three conversations, US-China, then China-Russia, produce any kind of alignment between the world's three largest military powers, India is navigating a completely different strategic environment. One where the assumption that great power competition works in India's favor no longer holds. But BharatLens will not give you only the alarm. There is a more balanced picture. Trump has personally told India that a trade deal is coming very soon. His assurance, delivered even as he boarded the plane to Beijing, is a signal that Washington does not want to completely pivot away from New Delhi. The US-India relationship has depth that goes beyond the preferences of any single president: defense contracts, intelligence sharing, technology partnerships, the Quad, joint naval exercises. That depth does not disappear because Trump had lunch with Xi. India also has something that China cannot offer America: genuine democratic legitimacy in the developing world. China's model is feared, not admired. India's model is aspired to. In the contest for the global south, in the battle for the narrative of what development looks like, India wins every time. That soft power advantage is real and lasting. And here is the harder geopolitical truth. A US-China deal that eases tensions is not necessarily bad for India if it averts a war in the Taiwan Strait. A military conflict between the US and China in the Indo-Pacific would be catastrophic for India's economy, for Indian diaspora in Southeast Asia, for Indian trade routes. Stability between the two superpowers, even uncomfortable stability, is better for India than open confrontation. India's challenge is to ensure that whatever deal emerges from Beijing does not specifically disadvantage New Delhi. That whatever tariff concessions China gets, India gets comparable treatment. That whatever technology or energy arrangements are made, India is included or compensated. And that the US-India strategic relationship is upgraded from a transactional trade negotiation to a genuine security and technology partnership that is resilient to the shifts in Washington's attention. Trump is in Beijing. Xi has been preparing for this moment for months. The room they are sitting in contains two men who between them control the largest economies, the most powerful militaries, and the most consequential foreign policy decisions on Earth. And India is not in that room. That is the reality India has to work with. The question is not whether India should be angry about it. The question is what India does next, because what happens in Beijing this week will shape the strategic environment India operates in for the next decade. Modi flies to Europe this week with a purpose. Show the world that India has choices. Show Washington that India does not wait by the phone. Show Beijing that India's partnerships extend far beyond Asia. And show every investor, every trade partner, every diplomatic capital, that India is the world's swing power, and the price of marginalizing it is higher than any grand bargain between two aging superpowers is worth. The G2 is a concept. India is a continent. And continents are harder to ignore than concepts. Tell me what you think in the comments. Will Trump sell India out in Beijing? And if BharatLens gives you the real picture when no one else will, subscribe. This is the lens through which India sees the world.